Okay. Well, how about we get started? Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. I'm joined tonight with Kylie Baker. Kylie's our operations manager, and she'll go over kind of some of the rules, as well as I have Paula. Paula's our nurse, and she's been with me a long time, and she takes care of all our female consults, hormonal, as well as some of the, and that would be the natural hormones like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, things that women need as they're going through menopause or they're having cycle issues. And she'll tell you tonight that, part of getting those hormones under control is getting the stress response system under control. And we'll try to explain that over the course of this next hours. And Kylie is going to lay down the ground rules as far as how this works, but I'm going to try to cover everything in about 45 minutes and leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. And if there's no questions then we'll cut off a little early, but I'll try to be mindful of your time so we're done by 8 o'clock. Okay, so with that.
Well, really, all that I need to just reiterate here is that at the bottom of your screen, there's a little question and answer chat that you can click and go ahead and ask any question throughout the whole 45 minutes, and we will get to them all at the end. So you're welcome to ask them. I will monitor them, and we will get to them at the end. So
sounds great. All right, well, we'll get started here. So my name is Greg Russell, and I'm a pharmacist, and nutrition is my hobby. And okay, you're supposed to work on me now. There we went. Oops, got a little aggressive there. Sorry. There we go. All right, I figured out what button to push. So my natural element is actually in front of people, so I can gauge, whether I'm connecting with them or not. So hopefully nobody falls asleep as we go through this tonight, but we'll try to keep it as lively as we can. But I'm still working out the bugs of Zoom. I'm still trying to figure this out, how to best to present these materials. So there's opportunities, which means we can do these more often and we can tape them. So Kylie will be sending you a link to this. So you can take notes as you're going through, you can relax, but if you want to hear parts of this over again, you can. Our pharmacy is a compounding and wellness pharmacy. We only do two things. We compound medications and we do nutritional we work with nutritional products. And what I mean by that is vitamins, minerals, anything that helps your digestion, whatever it might be. We're really into health. And those are only two things we do. And we will help people learn about their traditional medications or prescriptions. So if somebody is on 10 different medications and they would like an unbiased consult from somebody who's not out there to sell them those prescription medications, that's what we're there to do. And so you can call them to talk to Paula to get more information, but that is part of what we do is we try to at least help people make sense of their medication. We're not going to tell somebody not to take a medication, but we do want to try to make sure you know how to take your medications. And then if there's a nutritional product or that medication might be causing a vitamin depletion, we're going to let you know and give you some solutions. We sell professional grade, and when I say professional, I mean what you would see in doctor's offices. We're not out to sell you the cheapest vitamin. We're out to get you the vitamin that's going to work for you. And so that's what I personally, Paula, myself, and a couple others, we go through a lot of vitamins and nutritional products on a day-by-day basis to make sure we're carrying the best ones that we can. So that's my advertisement. And we've been around since 2004, serving Indiana and Ohio patients. And our mantra really is no two patients are alike. So we look for customized, individualized solutions for their health concerns. So tonight we're going to talk about adrenal dysfunction, stress, and with the COVID going on and the holidays coming up and the resurgence of COVID continuing, we're probably about as stressed as far as a society can go. We had a nasty election season and people kind of are on edge. And, my family is personally going through this too, because we have older parents And so we're concerned about how to keep them protected. We're concerned, do we do a Thanksgiving? Do we not do Thanksgiving? What's Christmas going to look like? I mean, we all, I have son-in-laws that worry about their jobs. And so, I mean, we're all going through it. No one's immune to it. And so, unfortunately, this prolonged stress is going to cause us to have some issues that we need to deal with. And today we're going to talk about these things because they bleed over into all of our health problems. And I talk a lot about adrenal dysfunction. And adrenal dysfunction is, in my opinion, a misnomer. I don't like the term, but everybody knows what adrenal fatigue is. So we talk about adrenal fatigue, but it's really a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis of miscommunication. And I'll explain that in the next couple of slides. And so how do you know? How do you know if you have some dysfunction going on? Well, a lot of things that we, just kind of classically kind of ignore, but say, well, this is because we're getting older or because we're tired. These are things that become the markers, and then we just need to investigate deeper. So for example, we're moving into that time of the year where we don't have a lot of sunshine. Well, guess what? It starts to go up. Depression goes up. And we'll talk in a couple slides about how the sun is so important to our biological activity. Poor sleeping patterns, whether you're you work a different shift, whether you have kids that wake up in the middle of the night and come get in bed with you, or the dog, it doesn't matter. We have poor sleeping patterns, irregular shifts. People that work third shift will start having these adrenal dysfunctions, these change in these circadian rhythms. Maybe it's GI dysfunction. You constantly, whatever you eat tends to make you a little more nauseous, or maybe you get all anxious, and when you get anxious, then you get constipated or diarrhea or both. And this is a common pattern that we see because stress is definitely related to our gut. And we call it the gut-brain immune axis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that tonight. But as we become stressed, it is starting to shift some of our hormones. We're seeing anxiety and other immune disorders. How about sugar and salt craving? It's the middle of the day, and I'm starting to crave sugary foods. Why is that? Well, that's because your cortisol is starting to dip, and some of your other hormones are starting to dip. And when cortisol goes down, insulin goes up. And when insulin gets out of regulation, it drops your blood sugar. So that's when I get that craving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Impaired cognition, fuzzy brain. We know about fuzzy brain. Weight gain around the middle. That's a big one right now. Well, I'm exercising every day for 30 minutes or 3 days a week, but I'm still gaining weight. And probably one of the most important things right now as we go into the COVID season is a poor immune response. So stress suppresses our immune system, and just having a lack of motivation. So what's really going on here? And I got a little window here I'm going to have to close so I can see. There we go. So there is this thing called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And basically you see up there on the right side, this thing that looks like the brain. And in the brain, at the bottom of the brain, is a gland called the pituitary. And the pituitary is what we call the master gland. And it sends out hormones to the adrenal glands. By the way, the pituitary not only services the adrenal glands, it services the testes, the ovaries, the pancreas, the kidneys. So it is a master regulator. And so the good news is it's very rare we see the hypothalamus itself fall apart. Because if the hypothalamus went down, and usually that occurs when somebody has a cancer, but if the hypothalamus goes down, we're in a heap of trouble because all of our endocrine system, all our hormones and everything will be totally messed up. And that is really a medical emergency. We do see that on occasion. We have patients that get a bunch of different hormones, but it's rare. Usually what happens is stress and aging starts to affect the pituitary. And that's where we're going to focus on tonight. So this series of glands sends communications back and forth. And the adrenals will send a communication back to both the hypothalamus and the pituitary that says, hey, I need help, or man, you're flooding me with hormones. I don't need any more hormones. So it kind of works like a furnace that keeps your home at the right temperature. It has a built-in thermostat, which senses the amount of hormone needed to maintain our bodily functions. So one of those hormones is cortisol. And cortisol is a major hormone. And when we have chronically high concentrations due to stress, this can, like I said, cause disruptions in mood, memory, cognition, and our overall health. And so the sleep, stress, lack of sunlight, and long-term diseases, there are many different stressors that can contribute to this HPA dysfunction, which I'd rather use that term than adrenal fatigue, because basically what it is, it's basically a telephone line. So the brain is sending a phone call down to the adrenal glands are sending it back. Now, I live out in the country, and sometimes my wireless phone doesn't work so good. It becomes sluggish. I can't hear people so well. And that's kind of what happens with the communication between the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands. The communication becomes kind of muddled, and we'll see some of those patterns here in a few slides. So what happens? Well, typically what happens is at night when you go to bed, if you look at the very far of the graph there, you'll see these 3 lines over there, and you'll see they're almost nothing. They're almost nil. From like midnight to 3 o'clock. They're really pretty low. All your hormones are low. And somewhere around 3, 4, 5 in the morning, we started to get a rise in cortisol. And cortisol kind of peaks somewhere between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. And then it starts to decline throughout the day. That is what we call the normal diurnal rhythm. And that rhythm is there for a purpose. That rhythm is what wakes you up and makes you feel like you had a refreshed night of sleep. So what's happening while you're sleeping overnight? Cortisol is rising, and as it rises, it suppresses other hormones, and it gives your body a natural anti-inflammatory activity. It's starting to take down inflammation in your body, and it's allowing you to heal. It's also taking inflammation down to the brain, okay? And that's really important with the hypothalamus, because that's how some of our memories are made. So as that inflammation is going down and the cortisol is going up, you get up in the morning and you walk outside and the sun shines shiny, and that is what we call the cortisol awakening response. And that's what's supposed to happen. When we see sunshine, it's supposed to kind of help activate us. You know, really, as far as a biological species go, we're supposed to be up during the day and asleep at night. But you know, modern society has changed some of that, because now we can work third shift. We have modern lights in our house, and those lights can actually disrupt, these kinds of cycle changes can actually disrupt our normal circadian rhythm, our normal cortisol rhythm. So how do we know? How do we know what we need to do? And one way we do that is we can measure cortisol, and there is different ways of doing that. We have a couple companies that actually measure cortisol by measuring saliva. Now you can also do a blood test, and you can also do a urine test. Now the urine test is not going to tell you enough information, because usually you'd have to collect your urine for 24 hours, send it into a testing lab, and realistically, all you're going to know is what your total cortisol is. Now there are some reasons why you would do that. There's a disease called Addison's disease. There's a disease called Cushing's syndrome, and those two extremes, and they're medical emergencies. And if your cortisol levels are sky high or really low, that will pick that up. But for most people, that's not going to give enough information, because you could have a relatively good morning cortisol. You could have a relatively good afternoon cortisol and then have a terrible night. Well, as far as a percentage of the cortisol that you would secrete in the day, that would be hard to pick up that way. So the way we like to do it is get a 4-point cortisol, 4 points during the day. And you could go get it at the lab. However, you do have to go to 4 different times at the hospital to get the lab done, like at 6 in the morning, 12, 5 o'clock in the evening, again, 9 o'clock in the evening. So that becomes kind of hard to do, because nobody wants to go to the hospital or to a lab 4 different times. So they came up with the salivary method. And so that's really the one that's most common. And we measure cortisol, and we measure another hormone called DHEA. And those we can figure out what those normal levels are for those different types of days, considering if you're not a night shift worker. So, you know, there are some things we have to take into account. But anyway, that can be done, and that will tell us kind of what your curve looks like. So let's talk about that curve real quick and what can affect that. So this is an oversimplistic diagram, because really, realistically, cortisol levels can change a little bit from day to day. And again, this is part of what we call the stress adaptation. And this comes actually from a book by a guy named Robert Zaplowski, who measured cortisol levels in animals. And he came up with this theory, and sure enough, it works in people too. So the book he wrote, it has this catchy little title that's really kind of cool. It sounds like a comic book, but actually it's quite complicated book. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting book, because it goes through and it talks about cortisol and what happens to cortisol. So if we take a look at the zebra, for example, the zebra sits around and he eats, he sleeps, has sex, grazes, and poops. That's 95% of a zebra's life, okay? When he's doing those activities, they all have to do with what we call the parasympathetic system. The parasympathetic system is our relaxation system. So it's doing those things. So along comes a lion. Now, the zebra is immediately to attention because he knows what the lion has on his plate, or what he wants to have on his plate. And that means the zebra now has to get into what we call the sympathetic system. The sympathetic system is when you're in the sympathetic system, you don't have time to eat, you don't have time to poop, you don't have time to have sex, and you don't have time to sleep. Okay, so it's the opposite. So it's kind of like an on-off system we have. And we've all heard of adrenaline. And adrenaline is that hormone that's released immediately to get you from point A to point B quickly. Okay, so the zebra sees the lion. It has to get up and go. So immediately the adrenal glands will secrete a hormone called epinephrine, which also goes by the name of adrenaline. And epinephrine does a couple things. It increases your blood pressure, increases your heart rate. It empties your bowels very quickly because you don't need to carry any extra weight around. You got to get going. And so this extreme amount of stress is actually, your body has made that extreme amount of success so you can get away from the lion. Now, the cool thing about zebras is they're either going to get away from the lion or they're not, but they're not going to stay in sympathetic overdrive very long, okay? Unfortunately, us humans, we constantly have stresses every single day at different times. And we talked about a couple of them earlier with the COVID, but maybe it's other things, you know, bad marriage, unruly children, a jerk of a boss, right, girls? No, you can't, no comment there. So anyway, the point being is we constantly deal with things all the time. You know, I'm dealing with aging parents right now, and that's been a real treat. It's stressful. It's stressful. So the point is, our body has this sympathetic system balance that goes on, and it constantly has to be. But as society has gotten more complex and even more contentious, we could say, lately, we're constantly being bombarded and our sympathetic system is on overdrive. And so what tends to happen here is we have good health. That's pre-stage 1. Good health means we get a little bit of stress, our body kind of comes back. You know, it goes back into balance. But then there's this alarm stage, and this is where we start seeing some problems. So stage 1 is an alarm stage, and that's when, hey, we get a little bit of stress, but instead of staying at baseline, we start kind of coming down a little bit. We don't go back to where we should. And so over a period of time, our body loses that ability. That hypothalamus loses that ability to control the adrenals. And part of that is because cortisol can be kind of toxic. And if cortisol is constantly being released, and we talked about epinephrine. Epinephrine is released real early, and your body actually stores a little bit of it. But what happens with cortisol is the body doesn't store cortisol. It makes it when it needs it. And it takes a little time. It takes about 15 or 20 minutes for the cortisol to be made, okay? So over a period of time, it's kind of like insulin. And if you've heard me talk about blood sugars, we get this kind of resistance going on with cortisol because it goes too high and the body doesn't like it. So it says too much cortisol, let's quit making it. And we get this kind of resistance here. The other problem with cortisol, as it goes high, another hormone will start going up with it called DHEA. So you can see under stage 2, we're into the next stage, the resistance stage. But in stage 1, DHEA actually goes up. And the reason it does that, it goes up to protect the brain against cortisol, because cortisol has some problems with the brain. It kind of cooks our brain. And DHEA is that defensive mechanism. So when Paula does hormone counseling, she does look at DHEA because we want your DHEA to be good. DHEA is a precursor to estradiol and testosterone too. So if your DHEA is starting to either get too high, then we can start getting things like acne and oily skin. If it gets too low, then you lose energy, you lose things like libido, and your immune function starts to go down. So DHEA is really important when it comes to cortisol balancing. As we move into that second stage, that resistance stage, now all of a sudden, we got this heightened amount of cortisol all the time, and now DHEA is pooped out. No more DHEA. It's low. Cortisol is high, and that creates a problem because now we have a lot of anxiety, and we're having problems sleeping, and we're really starting to have some problems. So we'd rather have you in stage 1, the alarm phase, than in the resistance phase. And finally, we get into the exhaustion stage. Now, fortunately for us, people don't really go completely down into the exhaustion stage. Like I said, this diagram is an oversimplification. If they do, that's what we call Addison's disease. And those are the people that can't get out of bed, or they get up and their blood pressure drops and they faint. Okay, so that's an extreme thing, and that's a medical emergency. However, it's a continuum. So we don't want you to even start cropping into that. We want to be able to bring you back. So those are kind of what we call the 3 stages. Again, it's an oversimplification, and it's not like on stage 3, the adrenal glands poop out, because that's not what happened. What's happened is the brain is protecting itself by sending signals to the hypothalamus and the pituitary to disregard what the adrenal glands are telling them. The adrenal glands only do what they're told to do. They can only make cortisol, they can make epinephrine, and they can store it. They can also make mineralocorticoid things like aldosterone, and that's what that does, is that helps keep your water levels right and keeps your blood pressure right. So again, there's crossover. That's why people will faint, because they can't make enough aldosterone, because not only is cortisol affected, aldosterone is too in the last stage. So I think I covered these here, but you can read those. Okay, so what do we do? How do we handle this? Well, one of the things has to be, we have to do some relaxation. And so what we do recommend is people do get some kind of light exercise. And depending on how sick you are, depends on how much you can do. So in the perfect world, we'd like everybody to get about, I believe, people need about 50 minutes of exercise a day, 5 days a week. That's a lot more than what you'll hear in a lot of things. But if you want to keep your insulin really good, the studies show that, doing a daily exercise, and it doesn't have to be overly strenuous, but it has to be enough to get your heart rate up a little bit. But for these patients, especially people that are exhausted all the time, we're going to start with like 15 minutes, 3 times a week, and work it up. Okay, things like running, walking, hiking, swimming, bike, yoga, martial arts, you can name it. Some things are going to be much more strenuous than others. So depending on what you need, so somebody who's, yoga is really good because it can kind of get people into a relaxation stage. Then we're going to talk about things like deep breathing exercises. So again, a deep breathing exercise, a real simple one, is what I call the box breathing exercise. Basically, you start by blowing out for 4 seconds. You hold it for 4 seconds. You breathe in for 4 seconds, and then breathe out for 4 seconds, and you repeat the cycle. So it's like a box. And what you're doing there is you're stimulating that parasympathetic system. By breathing out and holding it, you're stimulating your parasympathetic system. Of course, you got to breathe, right? So, so we want you to breathe through your belly and just do a really nice breathe out and breathe back in through your lungs. and kind of like you're sucking air into your stomach almost. Okay, so that will trigger the parasympathetic system. There's a vagus nerve, and as you're breathing out, the vagus nerve is connected to your lungs, and that's what slows, and it actually has been shown to lower people's blood pressure. So doing that exercise 3 or 4 times a day is very good. So for a lot of people that are having problems sleeping at night, we recommend that they do these exercises a few times during the day, because it's trying to get their parasympathetic system to work. And the parasympathetic system, again, is the brake on your body, kind of gets it to relax. Okay. There's also tools. There's an electronic tool that I have called a Heart Math. And I'm sorry, I forgot to put it on my office, but the Heart Math is this little device that hooks to the iPhone. And actually, I will show you my iPhone. There's a little app on it, as soon as I find it, in my app store, called Inner Balance. And you buy this little connection device to it, and it connects to the earlobe of your ear. And basically what it does, it's a biofeedback device, and it measures what we call heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is an indication of how your body is it in the zone, is in the parasympathetic. So heart rate variability is a tool that we can use to get our heart rate down. And again, that's the parasympathetic system. So the thing changes colors, and then it teaches you how to do this. And you do it by some visualization. And it's not as weird as it kind of sounds, but it's, you can watch this rhythm go up and down. It teaches you when to breathe by following the moniker. And then it turns colors. So you want it to be in green. And it's funny because they'll tell you kind of some things to concentrate on. And as you concentrate on those things, you'll see you go into green. And then all of a sudden you start thinking about work or running the kids or whatever. And all of a sudden you'll drop into the yellow and then finally the red. And so it is cool because you can actually see it and you can actually test it yourself. It actually does work. So that's kind of that concentration and just putting yourself into relaxation. So like yoga, it's been proven to lower both morning and evening cortisols. So other things that you could do, we want you to eat more small meals. We want you to eat less sugar. Avoid those foods that are high in fats and carbohydrates. We don't want you skipping meals. And we want you to make sure you're getting your water and your fiber, things that we've talked about in great depth in programs before. You got to get somewhere around 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. That's biologically been shown. I'm probably the world's worst breaker of that. I probably get about 6 to 6.5. But the reality is really our body does need 7 hours for it to completely heal. And what will happen is if you do have some deficiency, you will see an increase of your cortisol in your body at certain times. We got a couple of handouts that if you want them, you can email Kylie. Kylie, what's your email?
Sorry, I was muted. It's KYLEE@fwcustomrx.com. Most of you probably already have that because I sent you the link to register for the webinar. So it's the same email. Just send me an email over and I will be happy to get this information for you.
The nice thing about the handouts, they're free. There's nothing in them that you have to buy. So
true.
Okay. So I have about 10 minutes to cover adaptogens, and actually, and I could do that in 10 minutes. So this is kind of where, people start talking about herbs, what are herbs doing? And so, of course, herbs, I love to talk about herbs and tell you what they do. But what is an adaptogen? Adaptogen is, means adapt, okay? So how they've tested these herbs is, of course, you can give an herb and you can measure people's cortisol levels, but how do you know really what's going on? So what they've done is it's their effect on these things called heat shock proteins. So this sounds pretty cruel, and it is. They take little mice and they shock them. And as they shock them, these proteins are produced in their body, and they're called heat shock proteins. And heat shock proteins help our body, helps cortisol get into the cell and helps heal the inflammation and helps with stress. So over long-term continuation of shocking these little creatures, we find that these heat shock proteins start to diminish. They go down. And we call these, the heat shock proteins are also called chaperone proteins because they help carry cortisol into the cell. So what happens is when we give adaptogens, experimentally, we find when these little mice are getting shocked and then they measure the heat shock proteins, actually heat shock proteins go up. And again, that helps take the cortisol down. And again, these things are covered in that book that I talked about. And we've done a lot of biological research, not necessarily by shocking monkeys, but we've looked at how monkeys live in social scenarios. What happens to their cortisol levels? And what happens if we, use things with, if we supplement them with some of these adaptogens, et cetera, and what's going on. Also, if you look at these adaptogens, what I find very interesting is historically, they're used in different cultures. And so we're going to talk about things like ashwagandha, which by the way, is now starting to get very popular because of COVID, but it kind of sounds like something from Africa, right? I mean, it's just kind of this really crazy sounding thing. It's actually an herb from India. So they've been used for thousands and thousands of years by different cultures to handle different stress related events like ulcers and insomnia and stress. So these are very valuable herbs in certain cultures. So I'm not going to go through this whole chart, but as you can see, there's lots of products that have been used at different stages, and different manufacturers will manufacture different combinations of these products. What makes it very difficult, and for the average person, is they'll see an infomercial on TV and there'll be this product for your stress or burns belly fat or whatever it might be. And the $1 million thing that I know as I've studied herbs is it's not just the name of the herb that's important, it's how it's grown. It's what the percentage of the extract is, and it's how much of it's used in the formulation. And my pet peeve is I hate products that say proprietary blend. That means I don't know how much of an herb's in it, and I don't know what part of the plant, and I don't know what percentage of the actual biological agent that's in that, the actual agent that's doing it. So when it says rhodiola, I want to know how many rosavins are in it. I don't want to just know it's rhodiola. So one of the problems that we've always had, and what I've learned about over the years, is we want to make sure we get really good pure products, because they don't work if you don't. And they might actually do the worst. They might actually make you sicker. So speaking of ashwagandha, here it is, the first product. It's considered one of the most powerful and adaptogens due to its numerous benefits. Now, if we go back here to this other thing, you'll see ashwagandha is in all 3 stages it can be used. That's why it makes this kind of nice to use, because if there's one herb that we do know we're not going to get into trouble with, it's basically ashwagandha. And what it does is it does, experimentally, we've been able to show that it increases dopamine. So dopamine is the feel-good hormone, right? Dopamine is very important because dopamine is what kind of helps us feel good about ourselves. So it also helps us with our drive and our ability to go. It increases, it suppresses stress-induced increases of dopamine. It suppresses corticosteroids. Okay, so that's like if we gave you prednisone, it would take your prednisone down. It helps mimic GABA. Now, this is probably one of the most important things. GABA is what kicks the parasympathetic nervous system. GABA is one of the brakes to the body. It helps click the body back into parasympathetic. Also, GABA is important for sleep. So GABA is really important. So obviously, it can be used for anxiety, depression, because of that. It also has some anti-inflammatory effects. We've used it in fibromyalgia patients. It's just one of our favorite herbs, and it really is a nice herb. L-theanine is probably my favorite herb to use for people that have anxiety. One of the reasons is it's extremely safe. We've used this in children, and it's an amino acid that's found in green tea. Now, we usually dose at 100 to 200 milligrams a dose, and there's typically about 15 to 35 milligrams of theanine in green tea. So you're going to have to drink a lot of green tea if you want to get your theanine. However, I am not against people drinking green tea because it's got powerful antioxidants in it, e.g. CG and other things, and especially if it's decaffeinated, it can be calming just drinking a nice warm tea. Again, it works by affecting GABA and serotonin. And it is also, it helps modulate rising cortisol at night. So again, modulate means it's only going to affect something if it's out of kilter. So it's not going to lower cortisol if you need it, and it's not going to raise it if it's already high. So it's a modulator, and it also helps lower blood pressure. Now, the other thing I love about theanine, I call it the natural Xanax, and what I mean by that is when you take it, it is going to help. It's going to work pretty quick. And now, unlike Xanax, it doesn't have any addiction. It doesn't cause drowsiness. Okay. And why is that? That's because it loosely binds to GABA. Now, Xanax is like cement. It gets on GABA and it snows it. It shuts it down. Okay. So, I'm sorry, it stimulates GABA. It blocks a certain GABA receptor and stimulates it. And when that happens, especially if you drink something like alcohol with Xanax, you're going to put somebody to sleep and maybe permanently. Okay. Theanine doesn't do that. It just sits on there loosely, and it's not going to, you're not going to get addicted to it or anything. So 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan is another agent that we will use. Paul and I will use that. So we use 5-hydroxytryptophan because it's a precursor to serotonin. And so another agent we use is tryptophan, but we like to do 5-hydroxytryptophan because some people can't convert tryptophan to 5-hydroxytryptophan. So we will use products that have 5-hydroxytryptophan or 5-HTP in them because they'll convert to serotonin, and serotonin is an antidepressant. That's what Prozac does. Prozac blocks the breakdown of 5-hydroxytryptophan and the breakdown, it blocks the breakdown of serotonin. I just said that backwards. It blocks the breakdown of serotonin. What we're doing instead is we're trying to give your body 5-HT and let the body make it if it needs it. Okay, we're not blocking it. So again, it's not a drug. Takes a little time for it to work. You can find it in foods, but again, usually the easiest way. One caveat, Paul and I will not give you 5-HTP if you have irritable bowel or digestive issues. We'll give you tryptophan instead because 5-HTP does cause GI movement. So we don't want to give people diarrhea if they're prone to it. Passion flower, again, is another product that's used in a combinations of sleep products. So again, we've kind of drifted a little bit off the adrenals a little bit, but we're kind of talking about a little bit about stress and sleep. So some of these products we use in combination to try to get you to sleep because we know we can't get your cortisol levels down if we can't get you to sleep. And then the big heavy hitter, Paul and I will use kava on occasion. And we don't use this very often because kava is that is the one nutritional product that we sell that actually could cause somebody to fall asleep while they're driving. Okay, so we're kind of careful with that product because you can use too much of it and it can give you kind of a morning hangover effect. So we want to make sure. Also, if you have anything going on with your liver, and unfortunately about 10% of adults to 15% of adults have some form of liver disease, we want to be careful with this drug. The Polynesians use kava. It's a leaf, and they roll it up and smoke it, and it's very good. It really puts them out. So it's still used in the Philippines today, and the Polynesians people use it, and they don't sell much Xanax there because they got kava. So. And then, of course, we got things like ginsengs. And, be honest with you, the ginsengs are not my favorite, but I always have to talk about them because people want to know about ginsengs. But they do have different effects. And some ginsengs are more stimulating than others. So, we do use them in some of the combination formulas, but I don't like to use them by themselves. And they do have an effect on both cortisol and inflammation. But people like them because it kind of gives them a pickup. And then another one of my favorite herbs, ashwagandha and rhodiola are probably two of them. Rhodiola has been studied by the Russian athletes. They use these things widely in the Olympics. When I was a kid, in the 70s, the Russians were always doing the fun stuff, and trying to get away with it. Well, rhodiola was one of them. And they have more studies on rhodiola than any country. So rhodiola has been around a long time. What's interesting is at a low dose, it's kind of stimulatory, and at a higher dose, it tends to be more sedating. So depending on how you dose it and the purity of it, you can get two vastly different effects, and it's kind of an interesting product, but it is used in a lot of our adrenal formulations. Another couple that are really interesting is cordyceps and phosphatidylserine. Again, phosphatidylserine reduces cortisol. So we tend to use that when people have really high cortisols, and we'll dose that kind of in the evening. So the formulations that have a lot of phosphatidylserine, we tend to use as relaxing formulations. Cordyceps is kind of a cool product too, because cordyceps, we've used it. It kind of increases the ability of the blood to carry oxygen. So it's kind of a pretty interesting product. It's one of the few things. And so where this comes from, this actually comes from Tibet, and it's been used by the royalty, the kings of Tibet. And where it comes from, it's actually a fungus that grows on the back of a caterpillar up in the Tibet mountain range. So it's considered one of the rarest herbs on the earth. Now we make it synthetically. We're not harnessing it off of caterpillars anymore. But basically, it's in the mushroom family, and it's made synthetically, so it's and highly purified. But it's a really interesting product. It's also used. It was used as a fertility or an aphrodisiac to continue the royal line. So you know, the royals got it in their country. So again, a very interesting herb. It's great for people that have a lot of fatigue, you know, and it is an expensive herb. And then everybody's favorite, dark chocolate and licorice. We like licorice because licorice blocks the production of cortisol. So it's again, we use that to when people have when they need a little help regulating their cortisol. We have to be a little bit careful with it. It can increase your blood pressure. So, and then probably one that's really come into favor here in the last couple of years is holy basil. Again, another product. Now this one we love to use when people have irritable bowel. And one of the things we know is that as people become anxious, they have digestive tract issues. So we like holy basil because, you know, when Paula and I do a questionnaire on people, we always ask about the GI, what's going on. So if somebody's really stressed, and I can tell typically in about 5 minutes when we're doing a consult, just by their mannerisms, if they, if they're going to be low key or high key, you know, we can kind of do it. But then we ask all the questions too. But people that are really kind of to the point where they can't sit still on their chair and they're ready to go, you know, they're pretty anxious. Holy basil has some really good effects. And then a new one that's been out that works on the brain, the hypothalamus part of the tract a little bit more instead of the heat shock proteins is Bacopa. Bacopa has neuroprotective effects and seems to work, kind of helps with acetylcholine. Acetylcholine, again, kicks in that parasympathetic system. So it's kind of cool. It's been looked at for things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's too. But, you know, there's not a lot of evidence that does, but it does seem to have a kind of a resetting of that telephone line that I was talking about early. Okay, just a couple others. Again, you guys can flash through these. We don't use these as much. Shasander's probably used a little bit more than some of the others, but again, it's got an antioxidant. It's really good for people to help their immune system. Now, one of the things that Paula and I will do is we'll measure DHEA. And if your cortisol is really flat, in other words, the cortisol is not having a peak at all, and it's really low through the day, then we might consider using adrenal glands. Of course, if we're working at a doctor, then we might even give prescription cortisol. So cortisol, like licorice, what licorice does is it prevents the cortisol from turning into cortisone. So it helps increase cortisol. So that's one way we can do it. Another way we can do it is we can give a little bit of adrenal glandular. Nobody knows why the adrenal glands work, but I can honestly tell you these are really potent products, and we have given these to people that are really exhausted. What we have to really be careful of is we don't want to dose it close to bedtime because it can have a stimulatory effect. But if we have somebody who's really their rhythm is really flat, there's no mountain in it, no peak, then we will start thinking about using some glandular products in there. And again, DHA, we talked about DHA. If your DHA is really low, we will supplement DHEA. It is over the counter. It's interesting to me because DHA will convert into hormones such as estrogen and testosterone, which of course would require a prescription to get. So sometimes we can get around a little bit of low testosterone, a little bit low estrogen by giving a little bit of DHEA. And of course, vitamins. So when I tell people about hormones, controlling hormones, they're under the control of these things called enzymes. Enzymes. You know, all of our hormones need enzymes. And depending on your genetics, depends on how your body uses enzymes. But every enzyme still requires B vitamins. And it requires vitamin C, and it requires magnesium. And so if we're low in those vitamins, it doesn't matter how much hormone we give you. If we can't get the hormones to work in the body the way they're supposed to, because somebody's really low on magnesium, again, we want to make sure we get people balanced on their vitamins too. So vitamins are really, really important to make sure our hormones work right, to make sure the enzymes work right to help make our hormones go down the right path and work properly for us. So probably the easiest thing to do is to use combination of the herbals. So I have a couple formulations that I like that have rhodiola and ashwagandha and bacopa and holy basil and things of that nature. So you're not buying 3 or 4 different things, or you can try one adaptogen by itself at a time. But I think realistically, most people do better if we can combine them. Because we just never know who's going to respond best to which adaptogen. So with that, Kylie, I'm going to let you kind of close this out before we go to question and answers. I did go quickly. I apologize. I do speed talk here sometimes. And so this is your chance for me to clarify. And sometimes I say things backwards. And so this is your chance to catch me where I slipped. So
we do have some questions.
Good.
But so all of these products that were talked about, actually the entire store will be on sale on Black Friday and Small Business Saturday. It'll be 10% off everything, the entire store, except for our prescriptions. So we are running a huge sale on that. Also, Cyber Monday will be 10% off as well, but that is only online. So, and then Saturday, November 28th at 9:00 a.m., Greg will also be on WOWO, doing his Health Call Live show. And you'll be doing COVID, correct? You'll be
talking about COVID and the complications of COVID that now we're going to start seeing. So Lee and I'll be discussing that. We'll be talking about what the doctors are seeing, and then maybe some ways to kind of help prevent some of those adverse issues now. Start thinking about what we need to do in case we do get COVID.
Correct. So also, you know, there's vitamins and supplements that we all, you know, should be taking to boost our immune systems for the COVID, not only COVID, but flu season in general. And Greg will go over that as well. Mm-hmm. We do have a pretty specific list that we suggest. So if you're interested in that, just get a hold of me as well, and I can get you that information too. I think that's really it for the upcoming events. Do you have anything you would like to add to that, Greg?
No, actually I don't. I do see I'm missing a slide. I somehow lost a slide, but that's okay. It just has a list of our products that have those combinations in it. I know you put it in there. I must have downloaded the wrong slide deck. Again, I'm really good at this stuff. So
I do have that slide, that missing slide.
Paula, do you have anything you want to say? I'll probably have you help me answer questions for sure.
Yeah.
No, I just that we try to individualize all of our consultations, because no two people are the same. You know, aging, of course, changes everything, and things normally do drop as we age, especially like our DHEA. For women, it's going to be, you know, our testosterone, progesterone, estradiol, our estrogens. So we do individualize the care. We make sure that, you know, we do testing. We want to make sure that, you know, we're not giving you something or recommend something that you don't need. So that's why the testing is very important. And, you know, follow-ups with your doctor, especially if you are on hormones, you know, that's important as well.
Absolutely. Okay, so we do have questions.
Great.
So I'll start. So the first one is, what is the app? And
Yeah, great.
yeah, and could you explain the deep breathing sequence again?
I would be happy to. Okay, so let's start with the deep breathing. So deep breathing, the goal of the deep breathing is to get your parasympathetic system going again. So that is the fundamental science behind all deep breathing and meditation, is to get your body to settle down. You know, we're constantly stimulated, right? All day. I mean, I know it. I'm in the pharmacy, the phone's ringing the whole 12 hours I'm there. You know, we're running around, you know, we don't take time. You know, I ate dinner at 3:30 today, you know, 3:45. You know, it's just the way it is. We're all we're working as hard as we can when we work. And I get that. But sometime through the day, it's important to set it down. And for me at night, I ramp it way down. So deep breathing is one way to do that. So basically what you're doing is you're clearing up, you're starting the sequence exactly backwards of how you naturally would do it. And that's how I remember this. Normally we breathe in, right? We're breathing in to get as much air as we can as we roll through the day. In fact, if you really measure what you do, you breathe in more, you spend more time breathing in than you do breathing out. Okay. And why? That's necessary for you to get oxygen into your blood. Okay. So we started by doing the opposite. We're breathing out. You breathe out for 4 seconds and you're breathing out like from your from down in your belly button. You're breathing out. And you count to 4. And then you hold it for 4 seconds. Don't do anything. And then breathe in again slowly for 4 seconds. Hold it. And then breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold it. And you just keep rotating through. And it's not very difficult, actually. It's one of the easiest breathing exercises, okay? Now, the next step up is to use, you know, you can do other types of breathing exercises. And by the way, I have one of those other breathing exercises on that printout, okay, that goes through the breathing. But this is called a heart math, is the name of it. And if you Google on the internet, you can read about it. HEARTMATH, heart math. It's kind of an odd sounding product. This was developed for the Olympic biathlon team. So those are the people that get their skis and they ski and then they have to get their heart rate really low so they can shoot the target practice. We've all seen that during the Olympics. You know, they ski like crazy and then they do their 2 miles and then they have to stop and, you know, their heart rate's really high. So this was developed for them. And it actually used to be on a computer program, you know, on a big screen, and you had to buy and hook it up, which I have one of the original ones. But now it's made so you can actually get it. And the actual app that you get is called Inner Balance. And that's INNERBALANCE. Now, there's one thing you do need to know. The little electrode that has to hook in with that does cost money. And you have to go out to the HeartMath website to buy it. And depending on if you get one that plugs in directly into your phone or one that Bluetooth. So I bought a Bluetooth. It was over $100. Okay, so it's not free. The app, I think the app's free, but the little device itself that you need to use the app with is not. However, it is really cool because you can start training yourself and you'll see, like I almost immediately go into green now. When I first started, it took me 3 or 4 times of trying to get it to go to green. But now, you know, I know exactly how to do it. And what it does is the concept's real similar. You're going to breathe out and it puts you in a rhythm. It tells you when to breathe in and breathe out. And you focus that breathing like you're breathing through your heart. like your heart's actually breathing. And at the same time, you focus on an activity or in a setting that you like to be. So maybe one of your favorite places to be is on the beach, listening to the ocean. So you visualize that while you're doing the deep breathing. So it does teach you how to do those things. So it just takes you a little bit deeper, and that takes that heart rate variability down. And what heart rate variability is that's what they want, or it increases your heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is when I'm running, I want my heart rate up here, but when I've stopped, I want my heart rate down here. As we age and we develop heart disease, the heart rate variability becomes more narrow. So instead of my heart rate getting down to 60 beats per minute, it becomes 65, 70, 75. Okay. So now my max is 120 because I get out of breath, and I'm at 80, 75, 80 resting. That's an indicator of, that's a poor prognosis for heart disease. That's how heart rate variability. So we want you to be able to get your heart rate up to where, the higher you can get your heart rate up, but we want your heart rate to go down too. And then that's high heart rate variability. And cortisol has a direct impact on that with those other catecholamines, such as epinephrine or adrenaline, as I called it earlier.
Thank you. The next one is, how quickly does kava work for migraines?
Paul, you want to take that?
I don't really have a lot of information on migraines. Most of the people that I know that use kava, and myself personally, typically are using it for anxiety, and usually it kicks in within an hour. Okay, and it just takes the edge off. Like I said, I imagine that it would help with a migraine. I just don't have a lot of personal insight, or the women that have used it that come to me, they've not talked to me about using it for migraines. So, Greg, have you seen any studies on that?
There's some, and it's usually if it's somebody that's the migraines are due to stress.
Okay.
Stress is a trigger.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
Okay. The next one, how often do you take ashwagandha and L-theanine?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Well,
Yeah.
L-theanine, you can take 400 milligrams 4 times a day. You can take a bunch of it. You can fill a bathtub full of it. It won't kill mice. I mean, it's that safe, because it's an amino acid. It's basically a protein of food. So it's an amino acid that your body uses, and it's very non-toxic. And it's interesting. I will use that. So sometimes when people say I'm having problems sleeping, and you say, well, are you a little stressed? Yeah, we got a lot of things going on. I'm taking care of my parents, or, whatever it might be. Then sometimes I'll suggest, well, and they'll say, well, we're going to take a melatonin and that doesn't work. And I'm doing this and that doesn't work. I'll say, well, why don't you try taking a little theanine throughout the day? Let's try to get your body ready for sleep, by trying to modulate that cortisol. Help that cortisol get right into the right rhythm. And again, it affects GABA. So the nice thing about theanine is theanine doesn't cause drowsiness. It relaxes you without drowsiness. So it's, like I said, it's one of my favorite things. I've made nasal sprays for kids with this stuff, and it works. So it's now I will tell you, it tastes like green tea, snorting that up your nose. So
Ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha, yeah. Ashwagandha is usually dosed 500 milligrams twice a day.
500 milligrams twice a day. Okay.
I've seen 300 twice a day as well,
Yeah.
but it's hard to find it in 300. Usually it's about 500.
Yeah.
When it's alone.
Yeah. So when you see it in, now kind of the rule of thumb is when you see it in combination formulas, they'll use half of the maximum doses. So if we were given ashwagandha 500 milligrams twice a day, in an adrenal formula, it might be 250 milligrams twice a day, but they'll add rhodiola in there at half of its dose. And that seems to still be effective.
Okay. So the next one, this is kind of a two-part question. We'll just go with the first question first. Says, should vitamin D be taken with K2?
Okay, great question. So it depends. If you are taking a large amount of vitamin D or you're taking a large amount of calcium, then the answer is yes. Because what K2 does when it's mixed with vitamin D absorbs calcium out of your gut. Okay. The question is, where's that calcium going to go? It's floating around in your blood. We want it to go to your bone. We don't want it to go to soft tissue. We don't want it to go into the interior vessels of the heart or in your veins or your arteries. Okay. And vitamin K prevents that. So vitamin K will block calcium from going into your vessels and will help improve its binding of the calcium into your bone. So you're getting a twofer for that. And so that's why we like vitamin. So if you're taking 5,000 units of vitamin D, for example, that's a good amount of vitamin D. That's going to cause your calcium to be absorbed better out of your food that you eat or out of your supplement that you take. And so again, we want to make sure that we're not triggering it to get plaque into the heart, for example. Okay, so those are the two situations where. Now, if you're taking 1,000 units of vitamin D and you're not taking calcium and you're 25 years old, then you probably don't need K2 at this stage. So it just depends, a lot of things. But we do sell a lot of vitamin D3, 5,000. In Indiana, it seems like we have a lot of people taking 5,000 units or more of vitamin D every day. And they're basically just on the lower end of where they need to be. So in the summer, not so much maybe, but again, like myself, I love being outside in the summer. I could be outside on a Saturday all day and love it. But guess what I'm doing Monday through Friday? I'm in the store all day. So I'm not getting enough vitamin D the rest of the week. Good question. What else am I missing? Oh, Kylie got stuck, I think. Okay. I locked up for a minute. I don't know if you guys did.
I did too. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I hope everybody heard my answer.
Oh,
Can you hear me now?
I can.
you're back.
Good.
Now I'm on my phone, so because my internet apparently shut off. So I'm trying to find the questions. But I know the other question was basically she works pretty early in the morning, so she tries to go to bed early so that she gets enough sleep at night. However, it's hard for her to fall asleep, and she doesn't end up getting the amount of sleep that she needs. Is there anything that you would recommend to kind of settle her down to be able to rest easier?
Yeah. When you get up in the morning, if you're bright and peppy in the morning, when you get up, that's great. If you're not, then you need to help yourself get that cortisol awakening response back where it needs to be. And that gets triggered by sunlight, or you can use, I'll show you what I use. Excuse me. It's a little blue light, and it simulates the sunlight. And I get up about, anywhere from 4 a.m. to 4:30 in the morning. And I don't have it plugged in, but it has this blue light that comes out, and you don't look at it directly. You just kind of put it, if you're drinking coffee at the kitchen table or sitting in a chair, you kind of have it so you're not looking directly into it. But what it does is it wakes up that gland in your brain, the pineal gland, that, is activated by cortisol. So you can try to do that to try to get yourself back into the right rhythm. And we're losing you, Kylie, again, it appears.
I think I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
We just can't see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
We can see you.
that'd be one thing I would do. The other thing again would be I would take L-theanine a couple hours, like at dinner time, and then maybe right before bedtime again to try it again to kind of help get you back kind of into sync. That's where I would start.
Gotcha. Okay. Will you do me a favor, one of you, and at the bottom of your screen, there's that little chat box. Can you double check to make sure that I didn't miss any? Because mine cleared out when I lost connection.
I see. Yeah, my screen's starting to shake. Can you guys see that? Is it shaking on yours?
No.
Nope. Okay. All right. That's interesting. Okay.
All sorts of problems tonight.
Yeah, as we learn.
Yeah. I've been booted off like 3 different times tonight.
Okay, I'm looking through it. How quickly does Kava work? Okay, I'm right there. Also, it's hard to breathe wearing an N95 mask.
Mm-hmm.
For 12 hours. I agree. I'm hoarse because I'm talking through that thing all day long. And it makes me cough after a while. So yeah, it'll be easier to do box breathing if you're not having to do that with a mask.
Right.
You can get away someplace. For
Go to
sure.
the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4:45, 12-hour shifts. Yeah, that is rough.
I can't see all of them for whatever reason.
Looks like we've gotten everything answered. I think,
Okay.
what I can tell. If we didn't, feel free to call the store or send an email, and we'll post we'll post the answers also on Facebook. We won't identify you, of course, but so other people can see them too. So, but thank you. I think we're
Well,
out,
I've gotten a couple emails already about the handouts. So if any one of you, anybody else is interested or have any other questions, please just reach out to me. Like I said, I will respond to those emails. I'll get you any information you need, and we will go from there.
Sounds wonderful. Well, everybody have a great night, and thank you for joining us. And I love the questions. Keep them coming. So.
Yes, absolutely.
All righty. Well, good night, ladies, and good night, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, my screen started shaking.